All right, so after the break, one of the biggest names in wrestling,
Jericho!
By the way, Chris once beat Stone Cold Steve Austin and The Rock on the same night. But before Chris was a star, he slogged it out wrestling around the world. Dude was held up at gunpoint in Mexico, threatened by the Japanese mob, who hasn't been, and once worked at a kid's party for orange juice and a hot dog. He's got a new book. It's called A Lion's Tale, Around the World in Spandex. The author, Chris Jericho, next on the hour. All right. You're back here on the program. I'm going to quit stalling and get right to our next guest, because a couple of years ago, he left the world of wrestling and went on to other adventures. He's smart, he's tough, he's a legend, and now he's going to go back to wrestling. Mr. Chris Jericho will be here in a moment. If you don't know his awesome story, here's his bio.
WCW Cruiserweight Champion is the Lionheart, Chris Jericho!
All right, in pro wrestling, Chris Jericho is a megastar. He's excellent in the ring.
He's got him! Awesome Jericho! Why? These fans know it. Listen to him!
Entertaining on the mic.
I mean, you two morons couldn't string together two intelligent words, and I was forced to come out here and save this segment.
Now, Chris is a smaller guy who made it big in a very big man's business.
Born in Manhattan, New York, weighing in at 230 pounds, Chris Jericho.
He was born in Manhasset, New York, but he grew up in Winnipeg. That's right, his dad, Ted Irvin, played in the NHL and did commentary for the Winnipeg Jets. But from the time he was a kid, Chris dreamed of being a wrestler. Then one day he met Jesse the Body Ventura, and Jesse said, "You need something to fall back onto." So Chris studied journalism at Red River Community College. But at the age of 19, he said, "F it, I want to be a wrestler." So he went to Calgary to train with the legendary Hart family, and from there he wrestled everywhere. I'm talking Mexico, Japan, Germany, even the ECW. Wrestling is about character, though. What's your personality going to be? Chris tried out different looks. He was the Phoenix, and then he was the Super Liger. But they failed miserably, by the way. But by the mid-90s, Chris landed in Ted Turner's WCW. By then, pro wrestling was exploding, and Chris was on his way up. In 1999, he jumped to the WWF. At the time, the whole world was freaking out about the Y2K computer bug, right? And the WWF played off that with a huge countdown to the Millennium Clock. Finally, when it hit zero, Chris made his debut with the nickname Y2J. Eventually, WWF bought WCW, and in 2001, Chris had perhaps the greatest night of any wrestler ever. First, he beat The Rock, then Stone Cold Steve Austin to become the first undisputed champion. Now he's published a book about his career before the WWF/WWE. It's called A Lion's Tale, Around the World in Spandex. Ladies and gentlemen, Chris Jericho. How are you?
Man, I'll tell you what. That was quite an intro. Can you just play that everywhere I go? Like if I go into McDonald's for some fries, you just play that on a screen? That was awesome. I never knew I was that good.
Well, you were okay. You had a bit of run.
Right.
You beat The Rock and Stone Cold in the same night.
Yeah, that was cool. It was like winning an Oscar, you know, in the world of wrestling, toiling for many years. It took me 9 years to get into the WWE, which was my dream when I was just a young kid. And then actually get to win the championship after beating both those guys in the same night was like winning a Best Actor award. So it was very cool, very gratifying.
We showed it on the top there because everybody is who they came from in some way or form. Over there, it's your old man in a Rangers jersey. Yeah. Your dad had a hockey card, man.
He did. He had a whole bunch of hockey cards, which is cool. And actually, that picture right above it was from Madison Square Garden in the dressing room.
Well, this season, your dad scored 20 goals that year, right?
Yeah, he scored 20 goals that year and got 20 assists. So he was like the original power forward because he would beat some ass, too. When guys used to come into the league, they would try and take it out on him first to prove their toughness. I remember Dave Schultz, the first time, he said, "I'm going to make a name for myself in this league, Irvin. I'm going to start with you." Nice. So he was like the guy that they went to try and get into some fights.
So how does that affect you when you were a kid? I mean, when you know all these stories? Because I imagine your dad was away for a while and then here and there. But
yeah. You know, it's one of those, like, kids would be like, "Oh, your dad's Ted Irvin, he's a hockey player," and for me, it was just my dad. Yeah. You know, he still smelled in the morning like anyone else's dad, you know. And, so it was interesting, though, because I remember sitting in Madison Square Garden when I was about 3 or 4 years old and watching my dad, like, down the ice on a 2-on-1, going, "Dad, Dad, and then he wouldn't look up and wave at me. I get so, Dad, why don't you look at me? And I would put my jacket over top of my head like this, have a little tantrum. So it was very cool years later when I finally got to go to the Garden and wrestle there and do some main event matches there. And my dad was actually there.
Was he like, Chris?
Yeah, Chris! I just ignored the SOB. I was like, man, get it.
So much is made of your wrestling career, and we'll talk about it, but I'm actually very interested in the post-wrestling career for the last couple of years. It's because it's very difficult for an athlete or an entertainer to do something and then to not do what they're known for. And you've kept busy, but you still moved away from the limelight.
Yeah, I was really burned out on wrestling after 15 years. I left in 2005, decided to take a break, just mentally fried. And I was really lucky in that I had always kind of branched myself out. I had a lot of things that I wanted to do, and I never put limits on myself for what I could and couldn't do. I found out early on that the only people that tell you can't do something are the ones that have failed, the negative people. And I always kind of just ignored that. You're too small to be a wrestler. I was like, well, I humbly disagree. Same thing when I left the business. I have a band, Fozzy, and we ended up touring the world. We did really good in the UK. I acted in a couple movies. I had a radio show. I did this book, which was very much of an eye-opener for me. It took about 18 months to write that bad boy. So, I mean, there was a lot of things that I could do. So I never just wanted to be the wrestler because I'm an entertainer. I'm in show business. Wrestling is part of a show business. And I always looked at it that way. I always wanted to be the David Lee Roth of wrestling, the party host. Like, come on, let's go, come on, let's do it. You know, that was always kind of what I wanted to be. And so when I finally walked away from the job, I had all these other things that I could go into and work on, which was very fortunate.
Well, but I wonder if there was fear when you thought about leaving it, because, you know, if that's where people know you most, did you have was there any hesitation when you thought, it's the unknown?
I didn't really think that way because I was just really, there was no choice for me. I was done. Mentally, I was done. And it's like anything else. If you can't give 120%, you might as well just get away, especially on this job, because you could hurt yourself, you could hurt somebody else. You know, it's like, I love pizza, but if I eat pizza every day for 3 meals a day for 2 weeks, I'm gonna get sick. I don't want to look at pizza. I don't want to smell it. Keep it away from me. Same thing for wrestling. So about a year in, when I started writing this book, which made me remind me how much I love the sport and had a passion for it, I started thinking, you know, I could go back at some point. And that's when I started thinking, like, I started getting ideas again. Oh, I could do something with this guy, or I could do something with that guy. And that's how I knew that I was ready.
A lot of people don't know that in professional wrestling, it's a hard job because you spend a lot of time alone. There's a lot of other stuff that come with it.
Well, the first and foremost is it's such a mentally and physically grueling job in the fact that there's only a handful of people in the world that can do it at the highest level, and millions of fans that want to see it worldwide. So it's a constant hamster wheel. You're just going and going and going. Plus, it is lonely to be to be on the road by yourself. I mean, I spent 6 weeks in Japan. I was the only foreign guy. You know, I just traveled the subways looking for something to do. It does get to you after a while. There's a little bit of a stir crazy and cabin fever. And also, too, I think a lot of people just think you just show up and go, I'm going to be a wrestler, and you're on TV. It took me 9 years to make it to the WWE, and 9 years of working around the world. But also, I mean, working at a kid's birthday party for a hot dog and a glass of orange juice, you know, to...
You wrestled at this party for that?
Yeah, the kid I got a clown for my 7th birthday. This kid got 3 matches with ring entrances and everything. And, you know, and I got paid like in condiments. But it wasn't just inside the ring too. It was outside of the ring. You know, from getting held up at gunpoint in Mexico City at 4 a.m. by this girl that was going to take me to a party.
Sure.
And the party was me getting robbed and left on the side of the road.
It was a bad party.
Bad party. It was this sucky party, man. It was bad. This party sucks. You know, and then, you know, getting threatened by the Japanese mafia when I smashed a vase on the ground. They're going to cut off my little pinky finger. Like, all these things were happening to me at a young age when most kids my age were still living in their parents' basement working at Timmy Hortons. So it gave me so much life experience as well as experience in the ring too.
You're coming back, aren't you?
Yeah, there's a lot of speculation. As
when I saw that thing, that 222 thing around February, one of the kids outside said, "Is he coming back February 22nd?"
Yeah, well, I'm a magician with many tricks and secrets, and I like people hearing the story and seeing the story as it plays out. I think people feel a sense of entitlement to go on the computer and find out everything. That's no fun that way. I'd rather people wait and see how it unfolds, but eventually I'll be back.
Okay, just tell me and I won't tell anybody.
Okay.
What day you know? Oh, are you really?
Yeah, next year.
Really?
I just told him I was coming back on his birthday.
He didn't even know when my birthday is.
I don't know. He's like, really?
Chris will come back on August the 16th. Good to see you, man.
Thanks, man. I appreciate it.
Cheers, everybody.